Okay, well, I'm Brett Simmons. Nice to meet you all, and I'm presenting the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre, or MEC. I'll just refer to it as MEC from here. Very proud to have been involved in this project since 2018 when we undertook a detailed briefing with MAP and TRaM, who went into the space. So I'll start off with an acknowledgement. So Architectus and myself acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters where we live and work, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So, MEC is located in the Melbourne Connect precinct adjacent to the University of Melbourne's Parkville campus. I won't go into too much detail around the Melbourne Connect site because I'm sure you're all very much across it, but I do want to point out that MEC is connected to the superfloor on the mezzanine space of the Melbourne Connect building in the CLT building, which sits here, and it's part of the ecosystem of Melbourne Connect, and that's really important in terms of that shared amenity through the space. A little bit of really quick understanding of who MEC is and who the Entrepreneurial Centre is. Three key components sitting under the Faculty of Business and Economics. You have MAP, the Accelerator Program. So it's about startup business, always the alumni of the university, connecting them with industry and also teaching them how to commercialise their products. You have TRaM, so translating research at Melbourne, and this is deep tech. So deep tech pulled from the university, pulled in, and they're kind of nurtured and helped to connect industry and commercialise their products as well and head towards the future. And the Wade Institute, which is the teaching and learning part of MEC. So MAP and TRaM coming into the CLT building on Melbourne Connect, and Wade Institute is staying on Ormond College. So after the briefing and getting a really deep understanding of who is going to the building, MAP and TRaM primarily, we developed three key principal statements, which are our design umbrella under which everything hung. So the first one of those is object within an object. And that's really an acknowledgement of the fact that this is going into a CLT building. We always consider this to be like a little cubby house within the kind of massive scale of the rest of the Melbourne Connect precinct. And we wanted to make sure that whatever we put into this building in terms of the fit out respected that, stayed separate from that. And we developed this idea of objects within objects just to really, give that CLT building the respect it deserves. The second one is no thing is one thing. It's a very hard-working space, and flexibility is one of the key things that came out during our briefing. They wanted a huge amount of flexibility in there. So we wanted to make sure that there's not a single thing with this entire fit out that only has one purpose. Everything does double time. Everything works incredibly hard to fulfill the purposes that are required. It's a relatively small floor plate. It's a relatively tight space. So we needed things to work incredibly hard. And the third one is changes on perspective. And that's really taking this idea of following the line of thinking around innovation and creating new fresh perspectives, and I guess giving a physical manifestation to that idea of fresh perspectives of thinking. That's achieved both through materiality as well as the planning. As you walk through the space, it kind of reveals itself in interesting ways. It's not immediately apparent what you're going to discover as you turn a corner. And the base building itself and its kind of unusual sort of configuration does help on that. I'll quickly go through the plans, but I guess one of the key points of this project is it's designed to be a workshop more than a space that is set in time. It's designed to flex, it's designed to be hacked, it's designed to be messy is the key thing. We took these pictures obviously before they moved in to make sure it looks nice, but it's not designed to stay like that. And we wanted to make sure we actually created a whole series of interventions that allowed the teams that go in there to operate the way they do and control that mess as much as possible. And when you go to site now, it certainly is hacked. Let's just say that it's very much at one with the users of the space. A few key points on the plan. This connection through to the superfloor. This is all completely open. We wanted to maintain it open, so we inserted this steel curtain, which secures the space to be pulled back. Itself is a beautiful object. We've got a completely flexible front of house space. Breakout space is vertically stacked through the 3 floors of the CRT building. Ditto with workspace and the built form on the east and the west up against this core. They're all vertically stacked. I'll go into a little bit more detail around each of these spaces in a second. Moving up to level 1, so you're no longer with that connection accessed by a lift or the internal staircases. Workspace, built space, breakout space, vertically stacked, and we've introduced this, we're calling it semi-flexible workstations, where this is kind of teaching and learning light, as I like to think of it. They're not timetable teaching and learning spaces, they're not separated spaces, but they do need to be able to hold workshops in those spaces. So we developed this, I guess, a secondary typology that's different from the typical workspace, while still maintaining that density requirement for workers that it was requested through the briefing. And then access to the toilets in the base building was 3 here. So we ended up this little space, a little bit hard to plan, but it was perfect for a retreat space. And we've got different configurations on the different floors, and we certainly examined lots of different ways that we can plan that. I won't go into that because I'll go into a little bit more detail about the design. So this is really going to that object within an object. What we wanted to do is all our built form to be completely separated as much as possible from the CLT building, allow the structure to fly over, allow the timber to come through, and then carve out the spaces. So very simplified forms, carve out the spaces, and then color saturate within those spaces. So they become these real sort of key points of activity, whilst the outside, wherever possible, remains white. Again, it's got to be covered with post-its and everything else. We wanted to allow that to happen in clean white spaces. So we wanted to simplify as much as possible. And you can start to see that coming through in the photos. For example, this is one of the forms within the forms. And you can see we've cut out for the joinery and color saturated that as much as possible. So that becomes our pop of color. Everything else kind of recesses and becomes as simplified as possible. You're also seeing in this image the curtain which separates the space and can be pulled across. Itself a beautiful object and really captures the light and reflects the light with the stainless steel mesh. This front of house space, incredibly important to get right. This idea of showcase that came through, and showcase on many different levels, was really, really important. We wanted to make sure that this space can be configured in different ways, everything from a stand-up cocktail event to a hackathon, so they can work over 24-hour hackathon, panel discussions, Socratic learning. They can just form a circle and have Socratic learning. Again, that sort of teaching and learning light that happens in these spaces. And there was this sort of aha moment when we were thinking about how to achieve this. And it was a simple piece of furniture. And this one is by Derlot Additions. It's a local supplier. It's a bench system that can stack. It becomes a bench where you can arrange it for presentations. It becomes a divider in terms of storage. And when you have the small and then two larger ones, it's the perfect height for a reception desk. It's the perfect height for a bar, most importantly, for your cocktail events, which they do have a lot of in these spaces. So it was a really kind of simple solution to a very complex problem. And you can start to see it in these spaces. We did customize, we strengthened it, and we put magnetic little cushions there so that you can start to signify where people need to sit in these arrangements. So you can see it sort of being reconfigured in these ways. And it was a really sort of amazing moment when we did find it and we just realized we could do everything we hoped to achieve in this space. The breakout spaces, again, really, really flexible. But one of the key things we did here is recognize that these startups, these students are inherently messy, pushed all the messy stuff into the back and then brought out the beverage counter. So there's spaces for socialization around the offer of food, beverage, coffee, tea, whatever you need. And separating those just so you can keep it as clean as possible. Again, it's around controlling those behaviors as much as possible. You can start to see that tucked away and recessed in its color scheme as well. Collaboration and the retreat spaces, introduction of the dichroic film, introducing different types of settings, different heights, different textures into these spaces that overlooks the central courtyard with the mobile furniture. Everything is reconfigurable, everything is flexible. They use it how they want. These library spaces. 1 minute
remaining. Yep.
Okay, we almost there. These become as flexible as possible as well. Just some different views. Scrum spaces, again, everything doing double time, no thing, one thing. So your storage unit becomes a collaboration space, a scrum space. Dividers become different types of collaboration. Your library spaces, as I said, is also display. And even within the workspace, making sure you can move everything around as much as possible and that sort of connection through. And then the final thing, I guess, is just that little view of the workspace. And even here with the sit to stand, we've got units that are completely mobile, but they become part of that showcase as well. We incorporated these trays where you can have products and there's that sort of serendipitous interaction with casual passes through, whether it's a government or as part of the industry and business, where they can have those discussions around the products that they're developing as part of their startups. They're also mobile, so representing the different teams here that grow and shrink from week to week to month to year to year. So everything is reconfigurable within the bounds of a set workstation. And I'll leave you with a picture of me playing a sport, just part of the retreat spaces, which, really important that people get to come away and have those discussions, those sort of, work in a different sense in these retreat spaces, which becomes really important in the way they work and live in these spaces. I say live because they spend a lot of time in here.